Now, before we continue with the questions, I'd like to encourage you to also use the Q&A session to ask us additional questions, and we are here to actually answer all your questions. Okay, next. How often can your test results be mitigated by clients' anti-DDoS solutions, and how often do those need to be fixed in the end system configuration? This is a great question.
Yeah, I would say theoretically 24/7. Practically, radar normally is being used at least 40 hours a week on average. Remediation happens at a predefined intervals with the guidance of our amazing professional services team and the mitigation vendors, obviously, when prioritization has occurred. So yeah, let's put it like 40 hours a week in average, something like that.
Moving on. Can you show an example of what data is collected and how it is delivered to MazeBolt clients? So we take a lot of pride, actually, in the way we provide the data. And just before this webinar, I added some examples of some of the reports that we provide. So the first report, and I actually took some of the information, there's a lot more in our report. This is a sample vendor report. This report is designed to be provided to the mitigation vendors like Radware, Akamai, Cloudflare. And in this report, first of all, we provide an overview of how many simulations we ran, what percentage and what number of simulations were vulnerable, and how many were protected, and there's some tests that needs to be repeated. So this is a high level. So the vendor and the customer understand exactly what is their DDoS security posture. In this particular example, it is highly vulnerable, close to 60% vulnerability. There's also the top 5 attack vectors prioritized by the number of vulnerable targets. This is very important. When I showed before that circle of how we do our continuous DDoS testing, it's very important to focus first on attack vectors that will affect the majority of your network. So we provide our software automatically, by the way, and analyze that and generate this report. This is generated automatically. Also, underneath the graph, you can see the pie chart, vulnerability by OSI layer. This is also very critical. And another thing that I took from that report, and again, this is a very long report. I don't want to bother you with a lot of the details and technicality, but in this section, we provide a detailed attack simulation results. Basically, all the attack vectors that were able to leak through the mitigation layers. And this can actually be very specific. You may have a combination of different vendors, and one vendor that provides the on-premise equipment and a different vendor that provides the scrubbing, for example. So this will be provided to each vendor. So this is a great way for you to manage your vulnerability and work with each one specifically to close that. So this is a vendor report. Another report, and again, these are all samples. We're not sharing any proprietary information. And this is also a highlight from our executive report. What we provide here is a high-level simulation results over time. So executives can see the progress. And what I highlighted in circles is actually with this particular, when we first started working with this particular customer, protected could be only 43%, but after few quarters of continuous cycle of vulnerability identification and remediation, we got to 80% protected. So this is a great executive report. Now, all of these things, we also have an online dashboard that at any given time, our customers can actually log in And there's a lot of information in the dashboard. Actually, Alon, would you go over the dashboard really quick?
Yeah, sure. So this is a very nice dashboard example. Let's focus on the main area where we see the pie chart. And you see a lot of circles over there. Each circle represents a ring of security, right? Like you see a CDN, you can see a web application firewall, scribing centers. The colors are very simple, right? The green means those attacks were simulated on this ring of security and found to be automatically protected by the existing DDoS mitigation solution. The red means those attacks were simulated and found to be protected, which basically means they will penetrate your security into your network. Now, if you look on the chart below, you can see a whole story. You can see that at the beginning, there was a big area of red. And then if you go further to the right, you see the red area starting to decrease itself, which basically means this company was doing a good job. They found vulnerabilities, they fix it, and they can track its capabilities and its level of vulnerability as time goes by, because simply they are simulating DDoS attacks all the time, at least 40 hours a week, as we talked earlier, right? And then they can discover more and more vulnerabilities. We can also scan more targets in the network and services and simulate DDoS attack on them. And everything is done automatically, by the way. And it's also a managed service if this is something that you require. On the right side at the bottom area, we see a prioritization report. This prioritization report shows you what are the top 5 DDoS vulnerabilities found in your network. So if you're going to focus on those top 5 with our professional services guidance on how to close them, you will dramatically decrease the red area in your network. And this is actually what happened with this example in this, if this was a company, right? So yeah, basically you're going to cover this top 5, and then you're going to focus on the next top 5. And this prioritization report focused and based on vulnerabilities against number of affected hosts in your network, right? So if you can look on, let's say, on the most left side in that prioritization report, you will see that it covers a number of targets, which is very high for that network. Anyway, this is a very general, I would say, dashboard that gives you a very detailed information about the entire network. And I can say from my experience working with customers, they just love it. It makes a lot of order and manages all of their prioritization, where to focus and what to do next.
Thank you, Alon. I think in addition, when you spend so much money on different security layers, you want to understand exactly how each one of them is performing. So right. This is really not about, obviously, you can see when you log into your mitigation dashboard, you can see what attacks they stopped. But what you cannot see is what attacks they cannot stop, because right. It was never tested. So this is a great way to really proactively manage your security posture. And with the current landscape, this is highly recommended.
This is actually a very important thing you mentioned, Orly. The DDoS mitigation vendors can show you only what they recognized, what they identified and stopped and mitigate. They can't show you what they didn't mitigate because they didn't identify it. This is where MazeBolt comes into the picture, can show you everything. It's an independent tool.
So, just to summarize everything, this is really a breakthrough in DDoS security. If you look at the pie chart on the left-hand side, this is where the majority, actually every one of our customers, when we first started to work with them, it was a very high level of vulnerability. The vulnerability gap, like we said, was around 40%. And you will be surprised that in some cases, even major banks, we've seen something like 70% vulnerabilities. And there are 3 stages, actually, that should happen in order to get to the pie chart on the right, where the red part is very minimal, which means 2 or 3% of vulnerability. There's never perfect in the cyber world, unfortunately. But Nevertheless, in order to get from the left to the right, stage one is actually identifying vulnerability. Stage two is actually working with the vendor and taking action to close that. And once you do that in several cycles, you will get to the right-hand side, to that pie chart, and then you're more in a maintenance mode. The one thing that I would like to say about that even in this mode, as soon as your network is changing, when you innovate and you add mobile services, every little change that you do, again, who said that you are correctly configured to cover those services? Also, the other thing that is happening, the attackers are not sleeping at the wheel as well. They are coming up with new attack vectors, with new strategies. We see a lot of like micro-flooding. Attacks are becoming more sophisticated. So this is something that our team is actually researching all the time and adding more and more attack vectors. So at the end of the day, it's a combination of checking or testing for all the new attack vectors that are coming up in the wild against a network that is constantly changing and innovating. And the last thing that I would like to say, that again, no matter what vendor you're working with, you always need to configure and make sure that you are correctly configured and closing all vulnerabilities. Okay, so at this point, we actually concluded our introduction and planned Q&A session. And what I'd like to do is actually use the remaining of the time to answer additional questions. So I see here a question that, can you share some examples on how do you remediate the vulnerabilities once it is being identified by MazeBolt? Alon, would you take that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, that's the main question everyone wants to know. How do you remediate? Well, once we find a vulnerability, depends on the process that we work with a specific customer. Some customers like us to take the whole managing process and work directly with the mitigation vendor or technical teams. Some customers would like to be involved. Doesn't really matter. But once we identify the vulnerability and we understand what is the best technique to mitigate it, okay? For example, let's talk about, I don't know, HTTPS or HTTP flood, right? In some cases, we would like to use challenges type of mitigation, for example. In other cases, we would like to use a different type of mitigation or identification. We take that with the vendor, we talk with them, we guide them what options it's best to use for this customer. And once they're doing the action from their side, they're fixing it in the system, we can test it on the spot, because guess what? Radar technology is non-disruptive. We do not need to wait for a maintenance window to test it. And we can also do it with them together on the line with a live session while they're changing some configurations, they're changing some settings. We can test it as we speak, and make sure they're doing the best job they can in order to maximize the DDoS protection service they provide to our customers. Because at the end of the day, it's important to remember, you saw earlier the pie chart with the colors. We want to see everything green. We do not want to see any red color.
Thank you, Alon. The other question here, is there a way for us to test radar? Yes, absolutely. You're more than welcome to get in touch with us. After this webinar, we are going to actually conduct a network discussion of how we are going to deploy it in your network. A radar proof of concept can be done pretty quickly. And soon after that, we can roll into a license and start making sure that you are secured and configured correctly. So at this point, I would like to ask you if you have any other additional questions.
I just want to say one more thing. I'm encouraging everyone who joined this session and your friends, log into our website, go to the knowledge base, go to the white papers, educate yourself in your technical teams with the importance of protecting your organization from DDoS attacks. We see in the last year, there is a big wave of DDoS attacks in the network, right? We see a lot of groups like Anonymous Sudan and Killnet making a lot of mess and damaging online services. So, damaging means loss in money, loss in reputation. We encourage everyone to take the necessary steps to protect themselves. It's not something which is not impossible. Now it's even possible to do it more easily using radar technology.
So, Alon, just to add to that, I want to share with you, just a situation. Just last week, I was traveling to IT Nordic Security Conference to talk about DDoS and how we can become more resilient. Yeah. And while I was traveling with Scandinavian Airline, what happened was that they lost my luggage, and it was impossible to actually, and I felt like a victim to DDoS attack, not like actually a victim, because I was trying to check for my luggage and they were down for DDoS. So these things happen all the time. I think we can both put, a hat of a customer, an end customer, and also understand what type of effect it has on our customers. So this is critical.
Yeah. What is
Go
it?
ahead.
I want to share.
Question.
Okay. So we will answer that question, but I just want to share one small story from my side. A few years ago, I was in the USA, and I experienced bad reception in my cell phone. I dropped the subway, went to a Wi-Fi corner, to internet cafe to log in to see what's happening. And at the end of the day, what's happening is that a big, I don't want to say names, a big telecom provider was hit by a very simple DDoS attack. You saw it all over Twitter, you saw it all over the Telegram. They hit them so bad for one whole week, they could not provide any telecom services to their end users and other companies who was using their services. So I was affected also from a real DDoS attack. That can be easily avoided if they will just test in it and see if they are protected or not by a simple UDP flood. Yeah, go ahead. What's the next question?
Just about it's a simple UDP flood when you test it ahead of time. But right. When it happens in real time, it's not that simple. And what we're seeing, actually, we're looking at damages that were actually published. And talking about telco providers, just earlier this year, LGU was under a series of attacks, just under 2 hours. And they're actually going to compensate customers 40 billion yen, which is $30 million, just for those 2 hours of disrupted service.
Just for compensation.
Just for compensation, in addition to tripling their cybersecurity, because they understand that that cybersecurity is the basis for everything that they for their services. Okay, so the next question that I see here is, what is the attitude of protection vendors to working with you? Earlier today, I was just going to mention something, and then I'm going to give you that.
Go ahead. I would like to hear that.
Yeah, so actually just earlier today, Alon and I had a meeting with a customer that they brought their mitigation vendor. Actually,
a very
even
known
before,
one.
A very big
very
one,
familiar
one of the top. Yes.
Yeah.
I would just say that they're very known in the CDN protection. And we actually met with them to discuss, even before the project starts, how we are going to collaborate and work together. Because the bottom line is that everybody understands that the customer, the end customer, actually the enterprises DDoS protection is the most important thing.
Right.
So we see that they understand that it's for their own benefit. If they can tell their clients, 99% of our customers will never go down to DDoS, that's a huge win. Today, nobody can say it, but this is the goal, and this is what we're striving. This is our aim, to actually change this market for the better.
Yeah, you just need to think about it. You can offer a better product and a better service to your customers. So if you have someone competing with you on a similar service, won't you prefer to provide a better product, a better service? Yeah, so they like us. They like our product. They're in love with our technology. In the beginning, it wasn't exactly like that, but once they were familiar with it and they understood the benefit of it, they are just working with us in a very good relationships.
So at this point, I actually don't see any other questions. If you have a question, this is the time. But just like Alon said, we encourage you to visit our website. There's a lot of information there. There's actually also knowledgebase.mazebolt.com, when we provide significant information about all the attack vectors. There's information about how we deliver our services. You can actually click there and ask to have a demo. So we'll be happy to assist you. And you have our email here, and we'd love to hear from you after this webinar. So thank you, everybody, for joining. We appreciate your participation, and we will provide a link to the recording after this webinar.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure being here. And thank you, Oli, for this amazing presentation. And good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Alon.